Hello, everybody, and welcome to Answers for May 19th, 2020. I'm Kevin Daly. On today's edition of Answers, there will be a school update. There will also be a school at home update by Audra Talbot. My guest this week is Brian Klimkowitz, the Bureau Chief at the Bureau of Special Education at the Connecticut State Department of Education. And as always, there will be time for Q&A with participants. So get ready to bash that Q&A button. We want to hear from you. If you think of a question, send it over. Don't wait until the end. We would like to see them as they come in. Answers is brought to you by PATH, Parent to Parent Family Voices of Connecticut, a nonprofit organization that for more than 30 years has supported Connecticut families. Here in front of you, you see a partial list of PATH programs and services. I'd like to quickly put the spotlight on one of them, the Family to Family Health Information Center. Did you know that PATH is Connecticut's official Family to Family Health Information Center? This designation was given to PATH by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services through their agency, the Health Resources and Services Administration. There is an F2F in every state. The mission is simple: to assist families of children and youth with special health care needs, and also to support the professionals who serve them. So, who are children and youth with special health care needs? The definition you see in front of you is taken from Title V of the Social Security Act, which says it's youngsters who have or have an increased risk of the conditions you see there, and who also require health or related services that are greater than an average child. The kind of services PATH provides under F2F to families, first of all, there's free. There's never a charge for PATH services. And they revolve around finding care, health care, dealing with insurance, both public and private, and finding community organizations that can be helpful and supportive. What PATH does for professionals is we work with them. Very often we take referrals from professionals, doctors, clinics, offices. We also provide professional development to professionals so they understand where parents are coming from better. If you would like to know more about the F2F program at PATH, please visit the PATH website, pathct.org. And if you have any questions about this webinar, please contact me directly at my email address, kdaly@pathct.org. While you're on the web, drop into Facebook. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch us on YouTube. And while you're on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. Here comes the fine print, folks. This webinar should not be taken as legal advice. It should not be taken as healthcare advice. It's not even advice of any kind. It's a webinar about finding answers at a time when people have more questions than answers. And this webinar and any attached materials are the sole property of PATH and are not to be used for any other purpose without the express written permission of PATH. Here's the school update for May 19th. And we have some breaking news. Late last night, our governor issued another executive order. This is the 43rd executive order in response to the pandemic. The executive order covered a number of topics, most notably for our purposes. The topics included summer school, day camp, and overnight camp. Let's look at the details. For summer school programs, and I'd like to mention that I'm not talking about extended school year. the service over the summer that is sometimes given to special education students who qualify for it. I'm talking about the regular Gen Ed summer program that's offered by school districts. They are allowed to open in person with very strict limitations on July 6th. Of course, all this is subject to change, and like earlier executive orders, they can be modified. Think about the hair salons and the barbershops that were due to open tomorrow. Their opening date has been pushed back to June. So all of this is subject to change. For summer school programs, not ESY, they're allowed to open in person with limitations on July 6th, unless earlier extended, but modified or terminated by the governor. The Department of Education is going to issue guidance on limited operations of in-person summer school programs. Now for day camps are allowed to open on June 22nd. Now, if a day camp is already open as of May 5th, it can continue its operation. But for all the others, June 22nd is the earliest starting date. And the day camps must follow the same orders as childcare programs must. These orders come from the Office of Early Childhood. So what will happen now is the Office of Early Childhood will issue orders that will affect not just childcare programs, but it will also affect the day camps. What are these precautions that are taken by the child care programs? They include no more than 10 children in one place, no programs with greater than 30 children without approval. If there is a greater capacity, it is possible to apply for approval. And also there are enhanced healthcare procedures, things like screening workers on arrival, enhanced hand washing, cleaning, and disinfecting. For overnight or residential camps, unfortunately, they are closed for the duration of the public health emergency. And the reason is it's difficult to enforce social distancing and other health precautions in that venue. As of Friday, 48 states have ordered or recommended school closures for the rest of the academic year. And these states account for 99.4% of all American public school students. 2 states have not ordered or recommended school closures for the academic year. They are Montana and Wyoming. In those states, the decisions are made by the school districts. In the state of Montana, schools opened last week, including the tiny school of Willow Creek School, which opened on Friday of last week. Precautions include the use of masks, disinfectants, and social distancing. And here you see a teacher at Willow Creek who was issued a pool noodle to enforce social distancing. I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming months. For example, a picture taken last week in Germany shows a group of people outside a cafe using pool noodles for social distancing. And at Far West Elementary School in Utah last week, pool noodles were used as part of their celebration, a drive-in celebration to celebrate the final day of the school year. Meanwhile, in Wyoming, the state-ordered school closures expired on Friday last week. In April, Wyoming's top educator, Superintendent Julian Bellow, said that after May 15th, reopening would be up to school districts and local health offices. Now, folks, I scoured the web. I looked and looked and looked. I did my best over the course of days. I cannot find any record of a public school opening in Wyoming this week. I don't know if I missed something. I don't know what's going on. It's possible none of the public schools are opening up. And it's quite possibly because the school year in Wyoming is less than 3 weeks at this point. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, it's been 9 weeks. 9 weeks since the schools were closed, a long 9 weeks. 9 weeks ago, the focus was on what was closing and what to do about that. Now the focus is on reopening and what to do about that. Schools continue to be closed for the academic year. PPT meetings and 504 meetings are in progress and happening again. School evaluations are suspended for now, unless the evaluation was completed before the schools were closed. If an evaluation is finished and all the data is present for the team to use, it is possible to go to PPT with an evaluation. It can be done if school and parents agree. And of course, distance learning continues. At least it does for some. There's been a disturbing development in some of Connecticut's larger cities. They're missing kids. In Hartford, 600 students not engaging in online learning. They're not just not engaging, they are not present. They're AWOL since the schools closed. In New Britain, they're unable to connect with about 10% of their students. Well, folks, New Britain has 9,400 students. 10%, that's over 900. Over 900 students, AWOL. And get ready for this, Waterbury, 30% of the school district's 19,000 students could not be reached. And if you do the math, folks, that's 5,700 students who are not getting the benefit of education right now. These students have missed a third of the school year. When school reopens, it's going to be a challenge to get them to catch up. School people in the large cities are really going to have their work cut out for them. So how does all this affect special education students? Well, let's look at where we are right now. And where we are right now, from a certain point of view, is like being in limbo. The kind of limbo where you go and not much happens, but you know something good is going to happen later when it's over. There's always that hope. Now, teachers, special educators, service providers, they're doing a heroic job trying to keep learning going for our children with distance learning. They should be commended for it. But not one of these professionals would deny that the conditions are less than ideal. It's difficult for parents to accept that some important things won't happen until we escape from this limbo. And of course, that will be when schools reopen and we start to go back to our new normal. But that's when it will happen. And when the schools reopen, there is a promise that was given to us by the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, which states that when the schools reopen, IEP teams in Connecticut, PPT teams, will determine just how much our children have gone back, how much they've lost, and they will put in place, when necessary, compensatory services to help them catch up. This is a promise to the parents and the special education students of America, and we expect this promise to be kept. School people, I know I'm coming across as if I'm pointing at a directive, a mandate that was given by someone else that you're expected to follow through. It's not that. It's not that. I'm saying we're counting on you. You're our only hope. 90% of America's children attend public schools. 90%. We're counting on you. Please don't let us down. And parents, right now is a good time to consider forging a stronger relationship between school and home. I know it's not always possible to achieve, but when it's done, when school and home are in sync, some tremendous things can happen. And that's what our kids are going to need. They're going to need some tremendous things happening for them. I know that school and home is not always possible to achieve, but to me, it's an ideal. It's an ideal to strive for. People have to have ideals, and people should work towards their ideals. The next edition of Answers will be on Tuesday night of next week, May 25th at 6 p.m. Please join us. Coming up is my interview with Brian Klimkowitz, the Bureau Chief at the Bureau of Special Education at the State Department of Education. But now we have a school at home update from Audra Talbot. Earlier, Audra talked with a parent, a single parent, who lives in central Connecticut, and they talked about this parent's son. Let's hear their conversation.
Hi, Jimna. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Audra. It's so nice to see you.
So just to give some background information, can you tell us about your son and his special education needs?
Sure. So my son is 10 years old, and he is currently on an IEP within the state of Connecticut in his district. He is my gentle giant. He is a big, loving heap of muscle and love and emotion, and he's just the heart and soul of everything that I do. He does have an IEP for speech and for occupational therapy. So he receives services in school, and then I also have him in private OT sessions as well through my private insurance. So he loves doing things like yoga, singing songs. He loves music. He loves his books as well, and can't get enough of anything Nick Jr. So much Nick Jr. Yeah, he's got some sensory issues, very sensory seeking. He's pretty big for his age, and he's got a great growth spurt going on right now. So a lot of, tactile seeking, bumping into things, just a little bit clumsy, but also very just touching in my face all the time. So when we did his last triennial, his IQ was at 42. So he has also got some just processing and executive functioning issues as well. We're pretty on par with all the two-step commands. We're further venturing into three-step commands for him. But the highlight of all of this so far, since we started through this pandemic, has been he's almost potty trained. So for all you parents out there, my son is 10 years old. It took a pandemic, but he's almost potty trained. So that is my silver lining right now for sure.
That's actually really impressive. For us, that's a big deal. So I do understand. Yeah,
it is a very. He's 5'1" and he's 150 pounds. So toileting. He's basically a small, a young man. It's not easy, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you don't have to even. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So I guess just getting into it, how hard was the transition for you into distance learning?
I'm really fortunate because I was working from home already for my job, and I have a position in a corporate position. I'm an account manager. I have clients, across the country. So I work from home, and then from time to time, I do, hop on a plane and go travel to go see them. But so in that aspect, that transition didn't really impact me. But on the flip side, obviously having a special needs kid that's home, that's very demanding of attention, that has a short attention span, that is sensory seeking and looking for, input and reinforcement. That was hard to handle. I had a girlfriend come by. I've known her from high school, and she is a special ed teacher. So that first week we were home, she did kind of help me through a calendar and through a schedule, and that really got my son on the right course. But then, just like many districts, within a week's time, they were all gearing up for the distance learning, and so she obviously, had to get back to her own students. So I tried managing on my own that second week, like the third week of March, and I was dead in the water. I was circling the drain. It was, I lay awake all night on that Wednesday, and I just said, I got a tough decision to make. And it was super hard. Like, I'm a single mom. I need my career, and my son needs a mom. So how do I choose? And if anyone that knows me, you know me, my motto is, if not me, then who? So we do what we have to do for our kids. And right. I'm very fortunate. My company has been supportive, and I have taken advantage of the expanded FMLA program that President Trump signed into law effective April 1st.
So how is the process navigating the FMLA, and maybe what advice you could give to other parents that have to go through this too?
Sure. No, I'd love to be able to help anybody. So for me, I had never filed for FMLA, intermittent FMLA, because of my son's autism. I would qualify any, special needs child for intermittent care, PBTs, that's all available. I did the research on the rightslaw.com. I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know that's a really go-to reputable resource. But so for me, I started just doing that, and that's where I was going to, pull a trigger and apply for just standard FMLA, and then just use up whatever vacation time I had, really, because it's early on in the year. So, I was just trying to see what I had banked. And that's when I came across the FMLA that our president had signed into law effective April 1st. So, like I said, it was just doing the math and going through my household budget and, talking to his father, talking with my parents, my son's grandparents on his father's side, and just seeing how can we do this? How are we going to make this happen? And I feel like it was so terrifying because I'm in my mid-40s. These are supposed to be my highest revenue generating years. I'm X number away of years, so away from retirement, but I don't regret it for a minute. The minute I made my decision, I was at peace.
So what's the good part about distance learning for you?
It's really been, I would say, the flexibility. We do exercise in the morning. I said in my introduction, he likes his Cosmic Kids yoga on YouTube Kids. Can't stand about it. That's a half option for parents. You could sit and have a cup of coffee.
I do it too. We do Cosmic yoga. It's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we take a walk. My son does still like to get in the car, and our district is offering the free lunch program and the free meals. So we are taking advantage of it, and we get the breakfast. And I think more than anything, my son likes seeing his physical school. Like he's not going there and he's not on the bus, but knowing it's still there, it kind of clicks for him in a way that allows him to go, okay, we did school, we're going to go for a walk, we're going to do yoga, and then we're going to do, worksheets. We're going to do the worksheets, and we're going to do math on the computer. So it still really forces him, I think, to get just into that mindset that school is still here. There is still a physical building. You're just not seeing your teacher every day.
So what do you think could be an improvement for you?
So an improvement that that I've actually taken to his special ed teacher was as a parent, I spend so much time using iPad as reward. And so now he's using mommy's laptop. I have a touch screen, and then he's also got, his own little mini iPad that he has to earn for reward. And so I think it was really confusing for him that now I was telling him to do schoolwork for it, because that was he would have his little, like I said, Nick Jr. little videos on it. And I felt like a real disassociation there between, here's your iPad, go learn on it. It just wasn't categorized, in his brain that way.
Yeah.
So I talked with so we have, our district is using the iReady. We've got Google Classroom, Mac Scholar, Raz Kids. I've got a few different assignments and logins that they'll use. It's the logins. I can't keep track of all the logins.
It's awful. It's awful. There's I said about that, about how many passwords I have for each in the two kids, because they each have separate ones. And so I literally have cheat sheets. It's like hidden in the cabinets.
So what I did with his special ed teacher is I reached out to her because, I was on our district uses the Class Dojo Messenger. So I was messaging his, general ed teacher, and she's like, we don't really see a lot of logins from your son, and is he having trouble with it? And so I explained to her what was happening. And I just said, listen, my district makes available these worksheets when I go to the breakfast pickup in the morning. I've got a week's worth of worksheets here. I said, I really think my son he's just more attentive, and his attention span is longer. And he's more willing to stay engaged longer, to be able to do it when he's actually putting pen to paper. He needs that tactile experience to commit it to memory, to go through the equation, adding I have a little, we got on his piggy bank, we're counting pennies, add and take away. That is easier. I won't even say easier, it's not the right word. It's what works for him better.
Mm-hmm. It's how he learns. It's
how he's learning. And
it's great.
I said, listen, I'm mailing a packet to his special ed teacher with her permission. I have her address, and I'm mailing his worksheet. And we'll go in, I'll get him to log in, even if I get 10 minutes out of him on the iReady or the Google Classroom. But
to sit in front of a computer for my guy, my son, who is a young man with autism and speech apraxia and, attention issues. Yeah, 10 minutes, that's a big deal, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I would be thrilled with 5 on his own without me sitting next to him.
The other thing that has just been difficult is our district has just started delivering his speech services. So we haven't had any speech since his last week of school, which ended on Friday the 13th. He had his school was March 12th. So it's May 12th or 14th.
That's a long time.
So it has been a long time. I'm still working on I have his sight words, his flashcards, and that sort of thing. So we're still doing reading. And of course, I read to him as well. But, I'm worried about their stuttering. That's, that's emerging. That's things I've never really heard before. And they like to, for anyone that, receiving speech services, you'll see your children, they like to try out different sounds, the way their lips, shape their words. And so I can't tell if this stuttering that's emerging is just something he's trying on or if it's a problem. Like, I don't have any. So we just finally got, the district had to actually outsource, the SLP that we were assigned. She's wonderful. I've already gotten all my hours in for the week. We do it on Mondays and Tuesdays, and she's terrific. And I'm just grateful, as any parent would.
Yeah.
But it was 2 months.
Yeah.
So, but I am going to say positive that it was 2 months.
So I have one more question for you. And I think the last question, at least for me, is the hardest one. What's your biggest fear about how this will impact your son?
I don't know. Am I going to go back to work? Is my career going to suffer? Is my income going to be impacted? Am I going to go on, financial assistance, heating assistance, food stamps? I don't know what's going to happen. And that is a much bigger burden than where I am right now. I can't, but I literally just have to talk myself off the ledge, like every night. I can't control it. It is literally, you have to be present. You have to be, it's not even 1 day at a time, it's 1 hour at a time at my house. So.
No. If there's not anything else that you'd like to add, I'm going to close our session, but I just want to thank you so much for what you've added. And I hope that if there's just one parent out there that gets some type of inspiration or a little tidbit from Jenna or myself, it's going to help you. And, pass it on to another parent. So thank you for joining me tonight, Jenna. And thank you, parents out there, for joining us for Past Parent Family Voices of Connecticut. This is Answers, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very impressed by gymnasts and what she's done with many things, but with the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. Is this something that all parents of special education students should be looking into?
In my opinion, absolutely. To answer that, as the quick answer, absolutely, you should be looking into this. So a couple words about FMLA. What it stands for is the Family Medical Leave Act. And you can read up on that if you do a Google search, it'll bring you up. But I think the bona fide way to look it up is through the Department of Labor website. And it'll give you a great background of what it is and what the qualifications are in order to access that. Another way to access FMLA is through your HR department at work. If your company is able to offer that, and I think that's a great way to start the process. I think one of the most important things is this is something that we as parents, and Jimna was speaking about it as a single parent, a single mom. We as parents, we need to keep our head afloat, but we also financially, but we also need to stay home with our children so we can deliver services to them. So it's a catch-22 sometimes. What do you do? Which one do you choose? Because both really important. And so that's the situation that she was in. It's a situation I think a lot of us are in lately. So the FMLA, it can cover the current situation for the COVID-19. But also I think another really important thing is it was out a while ago. I read a couple articles, FMLA you can use for PPT meetings. And I think that's also another lining of that is it's there to help you. And so you shouldn't feel proud, take that off the table. Just go and access it. If you need it, use it, find out about it. And there's actually, I looked up so the Department of Labor website is literally just in small letters, dol.gov. If you put that into your search, it'll bring up the Department of Labor website, and you can take it from there. And I'm sure, there's other parents out there that are using it that would be more than happy to talk to you. And if you do have a question about that and you want to contact one of those parents, I know Jimna would be happy to talk to anybody about it, but I also know a couple other parents that are accessing it as well. So that's pretty much it about FMLA. But I want to thank Jimna for joining me. That was really great. That was a really great interview.
Audra, thank you so much. I am going to say goodbye to you now because coming up next is my interview with Brian Klimkowitz, and I'm going to bring him on now. Hi, Brian. Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
So a lot is happening at the State Department of Ed these days. A lot of new changes and a lot to deal with, a lot of things coming down the pike, such as a good example is the executive order that came out late yesterday that caught everybody kind of surprised.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. We've been certainly busy, and I just wanted to say, first of all, it just was wonderful to hear the parent interview there and to see, as Audra mentioned, it's so inspirational just to hear stories directly from parents and how they're supporting their students during this time. So, what a valuable resource. We've been absolutely busy at the State Department of Education. We're working remotely since the closures. Most of the staff at the state, although our building is open, but we're working around the clock to support families, students, educators during this time. And as you said in your open, unfortunately, there's more questions than answers as we're all navigating this process, this ever-changing process through the pandemic. But thankfully, I have an amazing team at the Bureau that's working to support our activities and our work. We've been very collaborative in trying to work together to support students and keep the main thing, as they say, with the students at the heart of all of our decisions. And everyone's safety, obviously, is paramount right now. So we have an amazing leadership team at the State Department that I'm fortunate to be a part of and included in. As we know, students with disabilities are general education students first and foremost. And I know all students have been impacted by this pandemic. So just happy to be here to this evening to listen in, answer any questions that you might have, and to provide any information that I can up to this point. I know last time we were together was before the April 24th guidance that we have put out. We've also had some updates to our early childhood information for our youngest learners. And now, as you said in your opening PowerPoint, we've been thinking about and planning for reopening, and you could see some of those activities will start to pick up over the next few months. But there's still a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty, and as you said, more questions than answers.
Well, the Bureau certainly has done a lot to support school districts in their efforts to support our children. And there are probably too many to name right now. But could you just tell us the top one or two things that you're doing for school districts to help them educate our children?
I think the most important thing, Kevin, is just keeping our ear to the ground and listening. Getting information, gathering information, and hearing from a variety of stakeholders, because it's ever changing. The needs are changing. The needs that school districts had in early March is different than the needs that they have now. And as we progress through the school year and the closures extended further and further, the needs evolved and the needs change. So we've been doing a lot of outreach, surveys, collecting information. I try to meet regularly with professional organizations, as well as our parent support groups. Getting regular updates from the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, our PTI, Parent Training Institute, has been essential for me and for our bureaus. So that's the first thing, is just being able to hear how things are going, what the needs are, what the challenges are, to help reassign or address our capacity to be able to respond to some of those needs. The commissioner has reassigned many of the leadership positions to be responsive to COVID and issues that have arisen. We've had several positions come on board during COVID which have been wonderful additions in the area of academics, a chief academic officer, chief talent officer, an English learner, liaison. So those folks and professionals that are now part of the team have hit the ground running and have been able to contribute to the resources that we put in place. So the communication piece is one, and then our role is to be able to put guidance out, which is challenging. I know you mentioned OSERS in your in your PowerPoint earlier, and I know OSERS is working on more guidance, and they have guidance in the works for some time, but it's just not anything that has been released up to this point in time. So we're using the information that we have. We're gathering input from stakeholders to put out guidance documents. And we're also working with our partners at CERC and the RESC Alliance to put resources together for educators, parents, and most importantly for students to help assist. And finally, the support piece that I mentioned earlier, understanding where the supports are needed, how we can best provide those supports based on the capacity that we have. And our partnerships, our professional partnerships, help expand our capacity within the Bureau and within the State Department. But I just want to thank, the parents. I want to thank the parents for what they're doing to support learning during this time. I want to thank the teachers and the paraprofessionals and the educators, like you said, that are doing amazing work right now. And understanding that people are overwhelmed, I think with the new responsibilities and doing the best they can with the conditions they have, working from home with children or young adults in the home to support, and educating our students at the same time. So I think Jim just mentioned that word flexibility. I think that's really the key, is the flexibility, and your advice, Kevin, of strong and consistent communications between home and school is how we will move through this crisis in the best way and the most efficient way for our students.
Well, I agree. The best way to handle it is with the information flowing both ways. So it's good to know that you're listening as well as giving guidance. Now, let's change gears for a second and talk about PPT meetings.
Sure.
What does it take for a parent to get a PPT meeting these days?
Well, as you mentioned, PPTs are happening either telephonically or virtually. Our April 24th guidance and March 24th before that outlines some considerations for both families and for school districts to think about safety, of course, to think about the purpose of the PPT meeting, think about meaningful participation and membership within that meeting, ensuring that all of the information is necessary to be able to make some of those decisions, and then collaborating and communicating on that. So I've heard feedback from districts and parents that virtual PPTs are going very well in certain circumstances, and others that that they're still working through some of the technology or working through some of the access pieces. Trying to find a time where they're able to participate is another challenge. I know there's challenges from the educator's point of view about being able to navigate the PPT process as well as providing continued distance learning at the same time, and then managing the paperwork and the electronic submission of data that goes along with that. So, to answer your question is that it's communication between the school and the parent. If there is a need for PPT, reach out to that educator, let them know the reason why you're requesting a PPT meeting, and then trying to navigate that schedule so that one can be scheduled. There has been a delay in certain circumstances depending on the meeting topics. You mentioned in your PowerPoint the idea of evaluations, for example. If an evaluation was underway and then the school closures hit, we want to make sure that schools have all the information that they need to be able to make eligibility determinations. And I think, a lot of work has gone into looking at special education evaluations in a different way now. I think, this pandemic has really forced educators to look at education in a different way than we have before, given the current health circumstances. And trying to look at the silver lining and look at the positives is a way to rethink how we used to do things. Why did we used to do things a certain way, and then work collaboratively to improve those systems if we can. We know there are some evaluations and some assessment tools that have to be administered in person or face to face. Otherwise, it compromises the reliability and the validity of that assessment. But a lot of work is being devoted to, and we're spending a lot of time researching how what evaluation could look like from a distance learning perspective for students. But if parents are having difficulty or have questions about PPTs or scheduling PPT meetings, I would advise first to just reach out to the school, reach out to case management, and then talk to an administrator if there's still some concerns or some barriers to being able to schedule a meeting. And then they could always reach out to CPAC and or the State Department of Education, the Bureau of Special Education. We have 2 consultants during COVID-19 that are answering all phone calls and emails related to the pandemic to be able to provide support to parents.
Fair enough. Now, back in the good old days, a mere 9 weeks ago and before, which seems like 100 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
When a parent could get a PPT meeting for the asking, school districts were usually pretty good about including parents in the decision-making process by giving them evaluations in advance, by putting together an agenda, by asking the parents for an agenda themselves, sharing draft goals and objectives, sharing a lot of the paperwork that's shared by the team. Now that the parent is going to be attending by phone or online, is there any reason why these steps can't continue?
I don't think so, Kevin. Everything that you mentioned, I think, can be looked at, and done in a virtual manner. I think, I have experience attending PPTs as a paraprofessional, as a special education teacher. Later in my career as an administrator, I chaired several, PPTs over the years. And what I can say, though, is I've never chaired a Zoom PPT meeting or a virtual meeting online. I have chaired or attended telephonic PPTs, when schools were open. But, one of the steps that we've taken is that this is a new skill and a new experience for not only parents, but also educators. So we have 2 main training areas for PPT chair training. One is called the PPT-LI. It's the PPT Learning Initiative Institute that we contract with partners from CES from Massachusetts. And it's a year-long training for chairs of meetings. And all of those components that you talked about is a piece of the training. Since March, that training has shifted to be able to provide supports and for educators to be able to learn and navigate the virtual PPT, so to speak. There's a different skill set that goes along with that. Part of what you said is being able to share information in advance. One of the things that we know for certain is that PPTs go much better when there's communication all throughout the year. So if the first means of communication is a planning and placement team meeting for a parent, or there's very little communication prior to, that PPT is not going to go as well as the parent and the school that's been in consistent communication, that's been talking about the progress of their child or young adult, that's been sharing information and concerns all along. that then the PPTs tend to go much smoother in those situations. Of course, there's always disagreements or the potential for disagreements between PPT members. So, you know, there are processes to be able to work out those differences and those disagreements. But I think, you know, the important underlying concepts of communication, equal participation, use of an agenda, talking about the IEP and focusing on the student, all of those components of a PPT can happen virtually. It just takes a little bit of a different supports and a learning curve for folks that the process is new for. So we'll continue to support that training piece. We also have worked with Doug and Joyce Little around the process, and many districts have accessed their services as well. And just like our initiative with PPTLI, they're shifting towards supporting individuals navigate the virtual PPT process. Excuse me. So I think, you know, like anything else, things get better the more that you do them, and the more sessions that you hold. You know, being upfront and honest about what your needs are as a parent, and what some of your concerns are, it would be very helpful. But you know, that the concept of being an equal participant in the PPT is certainly the underlying foundation of what a planning and placement team meeting should be.
Sure. Well, the dynamics of a virtual PPT meeting using video are very different from in person, and even different over the speakerphone, and it does take a certain skill set. I attended my first video-based PPT meeting just last week, and it was a Google Hang. The special ed supervisor who was running it, you'd think she had been doing this for years. She was a real smoothie. She knew the moves to make with very simple things that are so easy to get wrong, like introductions or giving someone the floor. So if she saw your training that's coming out of the Bureau, I think she definitely benefited from it. I learned a few things myself.
Absolutely. And, you know, a piece of that too, I mentioned the educators that are part of that. You know, the parent training is just as important in that area. So that's something that we're working with CPAC on as well. And, you know, if that's something that would be of benefit to parents, we can expand and extend that. The PPTLI training that we've had a parent panel in it. And that was one of the most, it was the greatest hits, or very well received from our participants to be able to hear the parent perspective. We also had a student panel and had students talk about what a good PPT meeting from their experience was, and what a challenging meeting and why. And to hear those perspectives was great. So the use of panels now can still happen, obviously, in our training. There also have been mock PPTs that have been part of that process. So the training's pretty evolved and pretty extensive, but we're starting to shift our resources towards supporting these different needs now. Again, knowing that our closures are not short term, that it's more long term, we're really going to be shifting our resources through CERC and the RESC Alliance to be able to meet folks' needs where they are and keeping everyone safe while we do it.
Well, needs seem to change day by day in these times, so it's good that you're doing that. Now, to change gears again, let's talk about disagreements between parents and schools. You know, when parents of a special education student disagree with their child's PPT team, they have the right to use the Bureau's dispute resolution process to resolve the problem. For example, parents can file a complaint with the Bureau. They can request a mediation hearing. They can ask for a formal due process hearing. How are the circumstances that we're in now? How have they changed this, or have they changed it? Is the dispute resolution process still working?
It is, Kevin. Yes, we're open and operational. Again, like everything that we've done, it was an adjustment for us. So it did take some time to adjust. And again, we had a sort of a plan in place for short-term closures, and then knowing that the closures were going to be longer, shifted from there. There was an executive order allowing the commissioner to be able to provide extensions to timelines for the dispute resolution due process hearings. So the pre-hearing conferences can be done virtually, and then an appeal to the hearing officer can provide up to a 90-day extension for those hearings. There's a lot of logistic issues as far as the process, and so we're also at the same time working on the potential for virtual due process hearings. So we are processing requests, assigning hearing officers when a request is made, holding pre-conference hearings, and then in some cases there's a pause or a delay to those services. But again, we're looking at virtual. With regard to mediations, our mediation system is up and running virtually, and we've held successful mediations during this time and during this process. Again, it took time to get up and running, but we do have mediators that are trained to be able to do that virtually. And the feedback has been pretty positive overall so far, working through some of the technical issues, but overall the process has been working well. And our complaint process is also open and operational. So we've been receiving and processing complaints and writing our reports. In some circumstances, there's been a delay in the school district's ability, as you can imagine, to access certain files or certain pieces of information that we need that's essential to the report writing. And in those circumstances, there's been an extension to the 60-day timeline for our report writing. But yes, we're open and operational, and our due process team is supporting the learning curve around moving to virtual.
I see. Well, again, back in the good old days, 9 weeks plus ago, when parents disagreed with a school's evaluation, very often the thing to do would be to come into the school and talk about it, either at an informal meeting or at a formal PPT meeting, which you could have at the drop of the hat, it seems, compared to now. But things are different. And if a parent does disagree with an evaluation that the school has provided, can they still ask for an IEE? Is this something that needs to wait until the schools formally reopen, or can the ball start rolling now?
Yeah, if a parent has a disagreement with an evaluation that's been completed by the school district, there can be a request for an independent education evaluation. The district still has a responsibility to respond. That there may be reasons why the response could be delayed at this time. I know we talked a little bit about evaluations in my former, one of the former questions that you asked. But face-to-face evaluations and being able to obtain evaluations right now is a challenge, given the safety context. So again, looking at what is the disagreement, still encouraging parents to talk to their school teams, try to work through whatever disagreement they have informally, discuss what their concerns are. During this time, the importance of getting that information, those types of discussions we really encourage to continue to happen. But those procedures still are in place. If an evaluation is incomplete, that's a different circumstance where a parent wouldn't disagree with an incomplete evaluation necessarily, but any evaluations that are completed comprehensively, that right is still very much in place.
That's good to know. Not that these rights need to be used on a daily basis.
Right.
What I tell parents is they're something you carry around in your back pocket and you keep back there unless you absolutely need it, and then you take them out. But it's good to know they're there. What about extended school year, ESY? Where do we stand with ESY at this point?
Yeah, so ESY is still a responsibility for the districts to consider for all of our students. The parameters for determining ESY eligibility haven't changed, within the context of this pandemic. And OSERS has said that ESY is different and distinct than recovery or additional services that may be required for students, given the conditions and of education right now. So the challenge really for parents and educators is to be able to plan for services at this time, given the uncertainty and the unknown. You mentioned earlier the executive order that just came out with information around summer camps and summer programs, which, thank you for clarifying the difference between a summer program and extended school year services. It's very important, and often people interchange the two, and we know they're very different. But the safety and the public health mandates and requirements would have to be adhered to. And so I think, what I've heard from directors and those that are with the responsibility of providing ESY services is that they have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, D, E, to be able to roll out for students that are eligible and do qualify for ESY, to have different scenarios for service delivery. One could plan for continued distance learning activities as part of ESY. One could plan for the potential of face-to-face, given the health restrictions and the health requirements as a part of that, or some type of a hybrid within the program. So I know there are a lot of logistics that go with the planning and the delivery and the implementation of those services. So we do have guidance that we've been working on in our team, getting input from stakeholders on their thoughts and their ideas around ESY in a solutions-oriented way, and that needs to be sent to districts and to families as soon as possible, because I know these determinations have been made and are in the process of being made. So we're hopeful to have that guidance document out in a formal way as soon as possible, now that the executive order has come out.
Sure. Good to know it's a work in progress. Let's take a look at some of the Q&A from participants. Here's one from a parent. I have a concern regarding the upcoming academic year. If we start with virtual or distance learning at home, how are teachers going to build meaningful relationships with students? How are we going to build community? What do you think about that, Brian?
Yeah, I share that concern with the parent. I think that's a really valid concern, and I think we've heard a lot about. Actually, I was reading something just yesterday about establishing relationships virtually with training. We talk about just using training as an example, not even reopening of schools, but the PPTLI for an example, or a lot of the sessions that we've run. Sure, they can be held virtually, but they're just like you said. It's the virtual PPTs aren't quite the same as face-to-face. Being able to establish those relationships, to build a foundation of trust, to meet person to person, and there's just no replicating that virtually. But I think there are some steps that we can take, and we're going to do the best that we can for that. And I know some of these decisions, the experts at the local level will be making with superintendents and the central office administrators and the teachers, the paraprofessionals, input from parents on how to navigate that. My wife is an educator as well for early childhood, and some of the creative ideas they've had to establish relationships have just been tremendous. Driving to families' homes, doing parades through the town in a safe way within their cars, writing to students personal letters, personal notes, sending them personal videos and personal emails. So the educators have some of these answers, but I think the concern remains certainly, especially for transition, for our kids that are transitioning. I think, so what I've heard from directors also is they're trying to utilize um, their educators in a new and innovative way. So in other words, where there have been relationships that are already established, utilizing those educators in different ways as we start to phase back into school in some way. So those are just some initial thoughts. I know that that's not an answer to that concern, but more of a validation, and then working to, again, improve things day to day.
It's definitely a concern. A student's relationship with their teacher, if it's a
Critical.
good one, yeah, that can enable learning, and vice versa. If that relationship doesn't exist, if it hasn't been allowed to be cultivated because of the pandemic, then it can have a different effect. Here's another question with asking about a interesting situation. I'd like to continue homeschooling my son on a part-time basis, even after this is over. I feel this time has been extremely valuable for carrying over important self-help skills like cooking, meal planning, and laundry into the home environment. Looking forward to our PPT in the future, where we can discuss keeping certain IEP goals on the distance platform and others like socialization and vocational job sites as part of his in-person education. Now, Brian, I know decisions like this aren't made by you, but what do you think? Is there any benefit to considering the option of splitting things up, or is it better to be all or nothing, to be distance learning while you need to have it, but after that need has gone, it's back to school? What do you think?
Well, one thing we know, Kevin, is that the philosophy and the foundation of the IDEA is individualized. So making individualized decisions in the best interest of students. It's not trying to fit students into a box or a program or a one-size-fits-all means. I know there are logistic issues that go into that, and a lot of factors that school leaders need to make based on the resources and based on some of the other aspects of being able to deliver these services. But I think that's the type of creative thinking that needs to happen moving forward. Again, I'm not the decision maker necessarily on on the details of the rollout of the reintegration, but like this parent, I'm assuming this is a parent that's asking this question. We've heard kids that are really thriving at home and doing very well academically, in that the parents have stated where they think their students are doing better than they perhaps would have in the school environment. So we have to look at that. We have to figure out why that is. Why the students are responding that way. How to continue some of that. I know last time you asked for, are there positive takeaways, from this pandemic and how it's affected us all, and the impact is just we just haven't learned what the complete impact is yet, socially, emotionally, the trauma that everyone's experienced, to a certain degree, the change in culture, not being able to hug or shake hands or do the things that keep us a community, like the last parent says. But I think, Gymnast said before, I think we have to be flexible to families' needs and to students' needs moving forward. So I'm glad to be and fortunate to be in the position that I am in, to be able to hear and take this feedback and try to look at or rethink our processes differently as we move forward. But I would imagine, within these reopenings, being face-to-face would be a benefit for some students and may not be for others with healthcare needs, or, until we get back to, I'll go back to that OSAP quote of normal operations, quote unquote. But what school, what we knew, what it was like, there's not going to be a flip that switch where we're going back to that situation. It's looking less and less like that's possible.
Well, a more integrated approach using more than one method, sometimes that's the key to success for special education students. I have a message here. It's for the lady that Audra interviewed, Gymnast. Just a quick message, and Gymnast, I hope you're watching now. I couldn't imagine doing this alone. Kudos to that mom. So kudos to you, Gymnast. I couldn't agree more. There's a question here about, not about schooling at home, but homeschooling. And Brian, I think you would know the answer to this. If parents make the decision to homeschool their child, does the school system have a responsibility to evaluate that child for possible special ed services? Brian?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Kevin. So once a parent decides to make that choice to homeschool, there's no oversight necessarily or responsibility on the school district's end for the educational aspect, but child find responsibilities would apply in that circumstance. If the parent had a concern or felt as if there was a possible developmental issue or a disability that was that they were concerned about, that they could contact the school.
I see. Now, what if that child happens to attend a private school, but it's not in the town they live in? Who would be responsible for assessing that child?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too, Kevin. There's sort of a joint responsibility there between both districts. So there's a little bit of communication that needs to happen in those circumstances, but the evaluation does need to be conducted.
Thank you. Another question. My son, who is in 5th grade, was due for a PPT meeting this spring, and testing was in process but not finished. Should I expect the PPT to happen in the fall? No one has contacted me about the status. Brian?
Yeah, I would suggest to that parent to reach out to the school to find out where they are with that process. It sounds like they've done a portion of, but not the complete evaluation. So the school district has the responsibility to complete that evaluation as soon as it's safe to do so. So there should be communication between the school and the parent to be, to keep up informed and each other up to date on when and how that evaluation can take place.
Another question. For students that have one-on-one para supports in their IEPs, has there been any discussion about directing school districts to provide stipends to parents to compensate for the costs incurred by families to provide these supports to students in home, especially for students who are unable to access educational resources independently? What do you think about that, Brian?
Yeah, I haven't heard those requests. So that's there would be some concerns that I would have around the use of IDA funds in that circumstance, but that's not something that we've addressed formally, Kevin.
Now, here's someone who wrote, I thought I read today that camp opens on June 29th. Yeah, I thought I heard that somewhere too. Am I wrong about that, Brian?
I'd have to look that up and get back to you, Kevin. Sorry, I don't have an answer on the camp's reopening.
Here's another statement plus a question. The stats at the beginning of the call were staggering, and I believe that's in reference to the students who are AWOL and have dropped from site since the schools were closed. What are districts doing, or are they able to do anything in regards to the students who are not engaged? What have you heard, Brian?
Yeah, and those are the students that keep us all up at night. That that they haven't been able to reach out to. There's been a lot of interagency work around that between the Department of Education, Department of Children and Families, and just wellness checks for families. So I think there's there's a lot. I want to say a sensitive approach to that situation for parents not knowing what the situation is in the household. There's a good chance that many students are transient during this time and perhaps not in the towns that they were in prior to the pandemic so that there's the approach as if we were in school has been advised. The State Department of Education put out guidance for attendance and graduation and so forth, and structures to be able to follow for students that are difficult to communicate with or to connect with. So similar to having attendance teams when school is in session, schools are taking that same approach so that they know who those students are, that they're making consistent efforts without being obtrusive, overly intrusive, during this time, and working collaboratively with outside agencies to ensure that those students are safe. But you mentioned if it certainly is a concern that these students are not accessing their education and their distance learning and continuing educational opportunity plans.
I can just imagine the amount of effort it will take to get them back to where they should be.
Yes.
We have time for one more question, and I'm actually taking several questions and putting them together because they're all on just about the same thing, ESY, and I'm hearing from a parent who is planning to take advantage of FMLA if ESY is going to be a distance learning experience. And they just got the paperwork from HR today. So congratulations, take advantage of it if you can. But the questions that I'm getting, what this boils down to is, and I know you need to look into a crystal ball for this answer, is ESY likely to be a distance learning experience? What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think given the current safety parameters and projecting that out, I would think that that there would have to be some component of distance learning within that. I think it's safe to say that in the months of July and August, it's not going to be a full face-to-face program like it was last summer. And I think again that I referenced the logistical, the challenge that both educators and parents have, being able to plan for and then implement and deliver those services. I think as the reopen parameters become clear and are communicated to our local districts and communicated to our parents, then some decisions are going to have to be made whether or not face-to-face services are provided, or a continuation of virtual, or some hybrid between the two.
As my grandmother used to say, the cat's up in the air. And that's her behind me right there, Elizabeth Daly. And when she said that, she meant that it's still a work in progress. You don't know how the cat's going to land, so it's kind of hard to tell right now. So fair enough, the cat's still up in the air. Brian, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here on Answers.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the invite and look forward to future collaboration moving forward. And just once again to the participants, thank you for all that you're doing to support students across the state during this challenging time. Be well.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Audra. Welcome back. Thank you for your contribution. And to everyone, be well. See you next week, Tuesday at 6 p.m.